Good morning, everybody. Democrat nominee in Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District race, Richard Dick Ausman, is our very special guest today, Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Candidate, a casual style and relaxed chat where we get to know the person, not just their politics. Special thank you to some of our guests this month, including Tom Tiffany, AFP Wisconsin State Director Eric Bott, Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald, Pastor Brian Cole, Democrat nominee for Wisconsin's 30th Assembly District Sarah Yakub, Adam Jarko and Joe Clayfish, as well as Dan O'Donnell from the Dan O'Donnell Show was on this week earlier. That was a fun chat. You can watch a recording of those and all of our previous shows on our website at DrydenWire.com, on Facebook, or on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/DrydenWire. Coming up over the next 2 weeks, we'll be chatting with Democrat candidate for Wisconsin's 29th Assembly District, Danielle Johnson, Democrat candidate for Wisconsin's 73rd Assembly District, Laura Gapsky, and Republican candidate for Wisconsin Secretary of State, Amy Loudenbeck. But today we're chatting with Democrat nominee for Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, Dick Ausman. Dick, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ben.
How are you?
Great to be here.
Oh,
I'm doing well, thanks.
Fantastic. So you and I had a little thing that a lot of people probably don't know, a little behind the scenes here. Most people do know I don't like to know a guest until they really come on to kind of get to know them. But it's always important that I have like a 10-minute conversation on the phone to kind of just understand their conversation style. And you and I have talking for like almost an hour. And I think we both had to stop. We're like, wait a minute, I'm learning way too much about you. We got to stop. Let's leave it for the show.
There's nothing else for me to tell you.
So I have an advantage where I've gotten to know you a little bit now, and we'll certainly get into some politics stuff and where you stand in the campaign and the race. But first, because this is the first time that you have been on, tell us about you. Where were you born? Where were you raised?
Born and raised in Merrill, Wisconsin. Growing up, my parents both grew up on farms. But I didn't live on the farm, but all the family reunions and stuff were on the farms, playing in the hay mounds and stuff like that. But, I was really defined by when I was 7, my dad passed away. My mom had 6 kids. We're in the city of Merrill. 4 were still in Merrill at that time. And there was no insurance. There was no saving. And she worked at a department store. She picked up selling Avon products. Actually, that was a lot of fun. One time we had a Rambler, and we're going out of the gravel alley to deliver Avon products, and my sister and I are sitting on the back seat. My mom takes a left, and all of a sudden the door opens up and my sister falls out the car. So we got her back in the car, all was good, and we went and delivered Avon. So, and then, we got our food in white boxes from the county building. She baked bread that I delivered around the neighborhood. She rented out my sister's bedroom to a student at the Teachers College in Merrill to make ends meet. That was my defining years, but I also watched my mom keep everything moving forward. She defined who I am today. You can sit around and complain, or you just make it happen.
That's right.
Yep, absolutely.
So how is that where you always were? Well, obviously you didn't stay in Merrill, right? Like, where are you now?
No.
Where are you right now?
Lac du Flambeau. Well, actually, right now I'm in Minnesota. My wife still lives here. I became a permanent resident of Wisconsin back in April again. I've had a year-round home in Lac du Flambeau for 25 years.
Lac du Flambeau. I know Fond du Lac. That's not the same thing. No.
No. Lac du Flambeau is an Indian reservation. It's 12 miles west of Woodruff, Minocqua.
That doesn't really help. Northeast Wisconsin.
So if you go 60 miles north of Wausau,
is that Rhinelander area?
From Wausau. Yeah, well, Rhinelander is about 40 minutes away.
Okay, that helps anyway.
That's a little bit southeast. So it's basically, if you go up 40 miles to Hurley, you're at the UP border, right in the center of the state.
Got it.
So it's pretty rustic, and that's actually why I'm here. If I have anything to do where I need to be connected, broadband, really, you don't ever know if you're going to have broadband up there.
Yeah.
So
we'll get back to that stuff. But where are we now? So you were in high school, and then where did you go when you left Merrill, Wisconsin? How old were you, and where did you go?
Well, I graduated from Merrill Senior High and uh, attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I had the funnest years of my life. I was a member of the marching band, UW marching band. As I mentioned to you, I'm the only person that any you or any of your viewers will ever meet that's done complete somersaults strapped to a bass drum. Let's just say it's not meant to be done. I did it 4 times the first year. The second year, the first time I did it, I got stitches. Second time, I made it, and the third time, that's why I have a hole in my head. It's not meant to be done, but I did it.
And why did you do it?
I don't know. I figured it was something that needed to be done. Actually,
College?
I wanted to freak out Mike Leckrone, the band director. Mike was a fantastic person. He
Okay.
was a very important mentor to me. I was on his band staff, and he frightened me. I was actually scared of him because he's an incredibly intelligent, wonderful person,
Mm.
and everybody wanted to just do the best for him. And for some reason, I'm sitting here and could I do a somersault with this? And ended up figuring out how to do it.
And after,
But again, it's not a good thing to do.
right. Kids, if you're listening, don't do this. This is one of those
Yeah,
do
don't
as
do
I
this
say,
at
not as
home.
I do kind of moments.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
What did you go to
exactly.
school for?
Well, I actually wanted to be a band director. But then I learned as I was getting into school that you had to learn a second language. And I literally didn't think I had the aptitude. I took German for 1 year in high school, but so then I became a business major. Pretty weird. You go from wanting to direct bands to becoming a
Right.
business person. But I needed to make money, and I started delivering newspapers for what was then the struggling weekly newspaper, the Badger Herald. And I got hooked into the journalism part of it. And I think I'd meant when I left that newspaper 20 years later, it was the 20th largest daily newspaper in the state of Wisconsin by circulation. When I left, what had
You must have been
happened was,
delivering a lot of papers.
well, and all the when I've owned newspapers, I've delivered because you have 5 delivery drivers. Inevitably, one doesn't show up, and so you're jumping in your car and you're delivering newspapers. Um, but I got into the papers, and there was a guy named Gillum Curley. He was editor of the Daily Cardinal, which was the official daily newspaper at the university, and he had served time in Leavenworth. He was a true communist, and he was using the student newspaper as his forum for producing content. And this was a weekly, and we had grown the revenues that I knew we were generating as much revenue in one day a week as the Cardinal was in 5 days. And I'm having journalism students come up to me and say, I don't write the right thing. I can't get the experience. Can you publish more? I mean, we're only a weekly. And so I visited the daily papers at Michigan State, Illinois, Northwestern, Minnesota. And what I saw was that these student newspapers were the training grounds for the journalists.
Mm.
They had a purpose. It wasn't just a club or something like that. When you go to the major universities, they are the training ground for where these folks get their experience. And so then I was dedicated to, well, we're moving forward to daily, and everyone again telling me we can't do that. Can't do that. I'm like, no, we're there. We're selling as much revenue. We can do this. And we went daily. And when I left that, I actually, for one semester, because of bylaw being it was a student newspaper, you had to be a student. And I eventually graduated. It took me 8 years because I would start out with 16 credits. And then I dropped down to having 3 credits because it was a full-time job. I was
Right.
working 60, 70, 80 hours a week there. And so I became a special student for a semester, trained someone to replace me. When I left, all the editors were paid. The top editor was paid like $9,000 a year. The other
Hey.
editors were paid like 3,000. Every writer, every photographer was paid. The point was because before they had to have jobs at different places.
Yeah, but that should be your
And
job.
this was they were actually paid now to do what they were training to become.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because it was the oldest conservative student newspaper in the country. And I made this thing flourish. And so everybody thought I was this arch conservative, and I'm pretty middle of the road independent. And so then I go to Milwaukee and I start an alternative weekly newspaper.
And when about was there age-wise? Mid-20s? We don't need specifics here, but
87. It was like 1987. So, I was born in 61. 26.
Okay, yeah.
I'll let you do that.
Mid-20s, we'll just call it. Got it.
Math. Yeah, yeah. So, and I knew I wanted to do something. I wasn't into the corporate stuff. Everybody else graduating from the business school is going to work for, they're interviewing on campus. Well, I kept dropping courses until I had enough. Suddenly, all of a sudden, I realized I had enough credits that I graduated. That's how I graduated. There was because it was all on building the Herald.
Sure.
And again, it was an amazing time. I was so fortunate to have that as part of my life. So I knew I wanted to publish, and Milwaukee was the place that didn't have. I mean, you had the Phoenix Times, you had the Village Voice, you had the Chicago Reader. Milwaukee didn't have an alternative weekly, and I'm like, all right, I know what I'm supposed to do now.
Oh, hold on a second. What is an alternative weekly? I'm unfamiliar with that.
Alternative weeklies are, there's what I've known as Franklin journalism, which is, it's what you want in the newspaper. Someone goes out, gets all the facts, presents them to you. It's like Walter Cronkite or whatever. Mm-hmm. Here's all the news, and I'll let you figure out what it means to you. You can make the final conclusion.
Got it.
There's then what I have heard termed as Lenin journalism, which is you're coming from a certain viewpoint.
Oh, sure.
And so you're not trying to disguise it. We were trying, as an alternative weekly, we were talking about things that the Journal and Sentinel wouldn't talk about. We talked about abortion in Milwaukee and the hospital, different things like that. I had death threats. Journal Sentinel never talked about that. I had to actually enlist my phone number because we wrote it. We had the audacity to talk about abortion, and I had to enlist my phone number because I received death threats. Mm. But there's also the fun part of that. I had The Adventures of Pookie and Doughboy. I started writing to my wife in the classified, and she was Pookie, and I was Doughboy. I had a little gut, so the woohoo push in the middle of the stomach, and then Buster was our dog. And every week, the last thing I'd do is I just write a classified to her, and then for whatever this went on for probably a year and a half, whatever. And one week I didn't do it, and all of a sudden, all these people are calling saying, "What happened to Pookie, Buster, and Doughboy?" And I didn't realize people were actually reading this. This was just how I was communicating.
Yeah, because how do you know?
Wife.
Yeah, this is before internet and before Google Analytics. Like, I don't know if anybody's actually seeing it. It's in the paper. Just because it's in the paper doesn't mean anybody's going to read it, or they read it once and never read it again. Like, how do you really know? Well, you just found out.
Yeah, it was my texting before they were texting to my wife. It was the way she could look at the paper each week. And I'm saying,
"Aw, that's cute."
Because we didn't see each other. I mean, I would drive to Madison to print it. I'd be driving it back at 2 a.m. in the morning. And then again, you'd have 5 delivery drivers, and inevitably who's not going to show up. Yep. And there were 60,000 newspapers going out in Milwaukee. Mm. And what's fun about it is that's exactly how many the existing weekly newspaper now delivers, is 60,000. I had the number straight on from when I started out. But, and then also we get all this stuff and people, what happened to Pookie, Buster, and Doughboy? And then I realized people are actually
reading
following this.
Right.
I'm being stalked, But it was a tremendous amount of fun. And at the end of 3 years, the funny part too, because again, people thought I was this arch conservative. I brought on the editor at that time when I left. Tim Kelly was the editor of the Daily Cardinal. And Maury Gash was an amazing photographer. He shot photos for AP and everything. He was the photo guy. And at the end of 3 years, it was different editors and such, but we won the Milwaukee Press Club Award for best feature writing in the state of Wisconsin.
Wow.
We beat every newspaper in that state. The
That's
Journal, Sentinel, Madison papers, the big Isthmus, which was the weekly. It's all about quality. That's what I care about, from a publishing standpoint. Mm. And as I progressed then, from there, my mom was dying. And in the third year I was doing this, and literally I was breaking even, at best. And we had a Mother's Day up in Merrill, and we went to a place, we ate, and then the bill came, and nobody was grabbing it. And I took it, and I couldn't afford to. And it so upset me. I'm like, I don't know how much time I have left with my mom, but I'm not going to worry about whether I can afford to take her out to a lunch, And my wife had an opportunity to move to Minnesota. And so we did that because then I was actually closer to getting over to Merrill. We had about another 8 months or so
Sure.
before she passed away. And and then I got into business to business publishing after she passed away. In fact, I was having my interview with the president of the company the day my mom died.
Mm.
And I called Jim and I said, we got our interview. Can we move it? I don't remember what it was. And he's like, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, my mom would want me to be getting on with my life. This is important. I need to start my business life again.
Mm.
And I got the job. If that's that probably got me the job more than anything. But and from then it was a wonderful. It was called Lakewood Publications, and it was all about human performance. We published Training Magazine, which was the leading magazine in the country, and helping businesses to train their workforce.
Wait, hold on. Where are you with this? So Lakewood. So you're what, about 30-ish?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
and now you said your wife
90.
moved to Minnesota. So Lakewood Publication, is that based in Minnesota?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
one of the largest business-to-business publishers in the Twin Cities.
Got it. So now you're in. We're
Sorry,
starting the
yeah.
30s here. No, that's fine. I just want to make
left
sure.
Milwaukee. I
Got
left
it.
Milwaukee and moved to Minnesota.
Got it. Okay.
And then, but it was a great company because we would figure out how much paper we would use, and we would replant that amount of trees. I always thought that was a fantastic.
That's cool.
It showed the culture of the company. I really loved that. And then, again, because it's about human performance. They lived it. Everybody went through all these trainings. I got shipped out to California to go through development things and stuff like this. They walked the talk, and they lived what they talked about. And I was brought in to create their in-house sales group. Within 1 year, I'd surpassed the goals by like 700%. And so
who was doing that job before? I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from you, but 700%.
Well, they did. It was just, no, it was. Well, it's not hard when you bring in and you have a contact management system. And I'm a good man. I'm a pleasant person to work with and everything. I'm, coaching people. You help people be the best at what they can do. And so then a publisher position opened up in what was called Presentations Magazine. And I was handling the inside sales for it. So I was really familiar with it. And I went for it, and I became the publisher of it. And it was, for the next 12 years, it was such a defining thing for me because it was the leading magazine on communication in the country. And I worked, and I built it. I grew it. I doubled the revenues. I created Russian and language versions of it. The Russian was fun. They spoke a little bit of English. I went over to Russia. And as I studied the cultures, you go over there, they eat a lot of raw organ meat. And I'm like, I've been to Japan because I started, Japan first. I don't remember. And I'm like, reading about it, they eat a lot of live organ meat. I'm like, I just don't know if I can do this. So the first night we're going to a restaurant, we're walking up these stairs, and there's a glass wall, and then I'm seeing all these live animals behind it. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like a fish tank. They kill it right there, and then you start eating the organs or whatever. And then I get the menu, and I'm reading it, and it's all this, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to insult them. But then I got to the back, and I got the like stroganoff and stuff like that. So everything turned out well. They're fantastic people. It was interesting because I stayed in the old KGB headquarters, and all I could do is look around my hotel room, wondering where the cameras were and stuff like that. I mean, seriously, it was really bizarre. But I went, they were wonderful hosts. They took me. Their cemeteries are amazing because it's the history of the country. They have these huge tombstones that are sculptures of people. They took me on a tour through their art museums, and the art museums are actually the history of the country. They're all nieces and nephews and cousins killing each other and taking over each other, and it's all displayed through the art museum. So anyway, that was an amazing experience. And then Japan, I had to use a translator because I didn't speak Japanese, I didn't speak English. And it was fascinating because we were over there, and after the first day of negotiations, we're going to eat that night. And we're in a car, and then they're following in a car behind us. And I'm talking to the translator about the day, and he's like, no, don't talk. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, no. They arranged the cars. afterwards, he said, they probably had a recording device in here so they could hear what we're talking about, so they would know how to go about their negotiations the next day. I never would have thought of anything like that. Just bizarre. But we got, it was a tremendous amount of fun. Often there's these Japanese language versions of the magazines and the websites, because these people, I'll never forget the first time I went abroad. I went to a trade show in Germany, and I had huge boxes of the magazine on a dolly, and it was heavy. And so every time I dropped off magazine somewhere, I felt really good because the load got lighter and lighter. I'm going through what's called CEBA. It's one of the largest trade shows in the world, 600,000 people, huge, larger than anything here in the United States. And I'm going down the hall one time, and all of a sudden I hear this guy yelling, "Hold, hold." And I'm like, is he yelling at me? And I stopped. They had heard about the magazine. He wanted to see this magazine because they'd all heard about it in America because it was the leading magazine on communication. And, that magazine also I was really proud of it because we won what are called 2 Jesse H. Neal Awards. Jesse H. Neal Awards are the Pulitzer Prize of the business-to-business press. Most publishers will never have a nomination. We won 2, and before I left that, we were up for a 3rd nomination. And I want to point out that I'm not winning these. What I do have a knack for, and what I had a knack for, was surrounding myself with incredibly talented people. It's fun to work with. I love journalists because they're always in the know. Actually, one of my favorite are photographers because they're always looking for that photo, that op. And so they're looking at something. We went to the 75th anniversary of Harley Davidson down at Summerfest Park, and I'm with a photographer, and all it is seal leather. But he finds the family that's an Izod, different colors of blue, the pastel, yellow, and whatever. Beautiful photo opportunity. And he's taking these photos, and he got into doing some other stuff that I thought were probably going to get injured, but it all worked out well because he was a funny person. But I love being around journalists. They're in the know, they're trying to help people. It's bringing information. And
I'm glad
some
you've had
not.
Okay.
Some are not. It's been sad because how they talk about fake news. The journalists I know, all are trying to do the best thing to help people understand situations and things like that. The media has gotten a really bad rap during the Trump administration. It's all because he's trying to cover up his butt. And so what do? You say everybody's fake news and all of this, and it's not. What I get upset about is that they call it Fox News. It's Fox Entertainment. What Fox has become is it's the National Enquirer that converted into a broadcast format. There's truth there, but you got to sift and winnow through to find out what the truth is and what's not. And you shouldn't have to do that. News is news. If someone says they're a news program, you should know that there's facts behind this, and you don't have to question whether or not this is legitimate.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you on that, but I think that's kind of true for a number of mainstream, not just the right, but also the left as well. When it comes off as, no, we are unbiased and we are just stick to the facts, and but do you though? And the thing is, they're not lying. They are telling you the truth, but it's worded in such a way. Even if you just open up all like the headlines for all the news organizations or like the top 50 in the country or even top 25 and look at the headlines of the same stories, even just how the headlines are written, it shows, okay. So I find that fascinating. I really do.
There's
like
bias.
Local journalism, that's where it's at. But at this point, I have a hard time with national
the
media.
Walter Cronkite, you didn't wonder where Walt sat. Peter Jennings, these folks, they pretty much knew where they were. And again, that's the type of, as a publisher, I have an influence because I'm going to hire the editor, and I'm going to make sure the editor emulates, what I want out of this publication.
So you were,
fortunately for my readers.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
Oh, please go ahead.
For my readers, fortunately, I believe in let's present the facts and let the reader
come to their own conclusion.
Mind.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
So you are in your 40s now in Minnesota and publisher of this. Then what?
The company went down the tubes.
Oh.
I used to know the president really well. He actually, the New York, this is one of the largest publishing companies in the world, based out of Amsterdam. And the president of the United States, we had 60 publications. And you either were number one or number two in your market, or they sold it. I mean, this was an amazing publishing operation. When I'd meet him, he'd tell me about stories. He actually read all of these publications. And so he retired. The person that filled his shoes, let's just say he was a little Napoleon. He didn't want to, a good organization, a good leader is looking to get as much information as possible, and then you absorb it and make decisions. He only wanted to hear what he wanted to hear. He knew everything. And so he's disregarding all the talent around it. Eventually, like most of the publishing companies, it got bought by a hedge fund. And then it just goes downhill from there. We actually owned, well, you wouldn't know these, SRDS. We published Hollywood Reporter. And I mean, we had a lot of glamour magazines, but the publisher of Hollywood Reporter had sexual devices on his desk, and he was skinny dipping with interns. The CFO was having trysts with marketing interns in the Roosevelt Hotel in New York. Everybody knew this stuff was going on. And, it just was it wasn't what I was a part of. Training magazine that I was publishing, people paid $78 a year for a subscription. And, they wanted me to start using clip art on it. And I'm like, no, that's not what we do. And one day I got this email, and actually one time in Minneapolis, the president had come in. Everybody was in a room, and he told them, he said, if Dick ever leaves, we're going to shut this down. And I'm like, okay, let's put some pressure on me. And I mean, the way things were going, one time I got this email, and I'm just like, no, this is stupid. And I emailed back, I think it's time for me and VNU to part ways. Hit it, and I'm like, what did I just do? My wife had been telling me to leave. People have been telling me, Dick, we know what you're under and everything like that. No one's going to fault you if you decide to leave or whatever. And so I did. And I was also at a point in time, because I was gone every week. I was in Asia, Singapore, Japan, Russia. And if I was in the United States, I was in a different part of the United States every week. I mean, I was always traveling. And now I had kids, and they were like 4 and 6. And part of it was, it no longer, the fun of the job and what I was doing was no longer overweighing me being away from my kids. And so my assistant worked for a billionaire here in the Twin Cities. And she was telling them, you got to meet Dick. And so they called me and said, we'd like to interview you. Come on in. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing anything for the summer. I'm taking the summer off to be with my kids. This was in May when I had quit. And sometime during the summer, they called me, said, could we please talk? I said, no, well, talk when my kids are back in school. I'm just enjoying being with my kids. So literally the first day my kids are back in school, I get a call, can we talk now? And I'm like, yeah. And I ended up working for the Oppermans. And I mean, what an amazing operation. They had what was called Key Professional Media. They published super lawyers. It was a system for identifying the very best lawyers. And I analyzed the system because with my magazines, we did a lot of research, and I realized this was bona fide. It was a real thing. And so I signed on, and I was also helping them with consulting at that time on another publication. And I'll never forget the CFO telling me, we're talking about people. And he told me how, as we're analyzing people, he said, all we care, and you can do this when you're a billionaire. It doesn't happen in private industry. All we care is that people give us the best of their ability. And we're good with that. It's not everyone's going to be that A player. You have someone who has a developmental disability or something like that. They may not be the star player.
Right.
But as long as they knew they were giving it their all, that's all that mattered to them. And I thought, this place gets it. And so I helped expand super lawyers around the country. I actually helped expand it into London. And it was just a fun time. And we actually, we went through a Supreme Court case because they were saying this wasn't bona fide. We won the Supreme Court case, and we actually got a trademark on the process. And then, Vance sits on the board of directors of Thomson Reuters, and he knew, being on the board, that they wanted to get into the ratings agency. So he sold it to Thomson Reuters. And he actually sold it at less money because he was on the board. He couldn't make he had to actually, I think, make less money from it. And then we became part of the big organization, and, it wasn't the same. I stayed there for 3, 4, 5 years or whatever. But then I had the opportunity to get back into publishing again. Being the publisher, I took over the meetings events group.
I'm sorry, the what group?
Meetings and events.
Meetings and
They
events.
publish. Again, most of my time is business to business, and
Sure.
these are the magazines that help planners and people who need to plan meetings and
Oh,
events
sure.
and stuff like that. Had 13 publications around the country. Well, that eventually went into bankruptcy. We also had Seattle Magazine. It was privately owned, and the owner just drove it into the ground. I
Oh,
mean, it went into bankruptcy. I was actually going to buy it out of bankruptcy, my division, because my division was doing really well. I built it most profitable it had ever been. And so I was going to trying to buy it out of bankruptcy. And then all of a sudden I hear that there's a bid on it. And I'm like, well, I'm out. I'm not in for a bidding war here. I thought I might be able to pick it up cheap. I don't have deep pockets.
right.
And then I find out the company that bought it was actually a company I had approached when it first was going down the tubes. And they own Detroit Magazine, Los Angeles Magazine, 143 magazines. I'm glad I didn't get into a bidding contest with them. And so they got it. But then I was moving back to Wisconsin, and I was starting a publication in northern Wisconsin. Website was designed. I hired the same company that designed the website for the city of St. Paul and maintains it. I hired them to develop the website. I was ready to go with publication. Saw some way I could do some live events because the area where I'm from is not well served editorial wise.
Mm.
And the newspaper that's up there ran misinformation on the vaccines and COVID. And I'm like, that's enough of this. I've read it for a decade. The father was a really great publisher. And the son took it over. And let's just say they say that they are the newspaper of the year. They run ads for newspaper of the year. But what they don't run is it's Class D. That's sort of an important thing to put in if you're touting that you are the newspaper of the year in an advertisement. There's different classes. And so, it's just that's the type of journalism it is. And again, I'm about the very best journalism. So I knew there was a need up there. And then at the same time, I figured out, okay, I'm going to have the structure for this. The meetings events, they bought it, but they didn't know what I knew. I'm the person that built it into what it is. And when I was with that group, our website used to be meetingsmag.com, and I'm actually divulging information, but it's okay. If they hear your show, they didn't have the website, and I was trying to find out who owns meetingsevents.com. Every industry has its keywords, and I'm like, and I could never find out who owned it. I wanted to buy it, and so I did that research on my own. Found it, and I now own meetingsevents.com.
Hey.
I can be the stupidest publisher on the face of the earth, and I will make a lot of money because I own the keywords to the industry. Look at Hilton. Go to Hilton.com. Go to Marriott. Very bottom left is meetings and events. And I know all the but then so all of this is all coming together, and like I am ready to rock and roll. And then I realized that Tom Tiffany is going to run unopposed.
Sure. Okay, hold on a second.
Looking at this record, and I'm
so
like,
that is where we're up to then. And I'm
yeah.
I'm not going to ask your age, but are we talking
61.
ballpark? Oh, there you go. So what's 60? So just so you moved to Minnesota around 30ish. You're still there. So this must have been, and this is what I'll ask you. I mean, you were there until a short time right before you're talking about, right? You were still in Minnesota. So for about 30 years, like a lot of your adult life there. And then you decide, I think I'm going to run. Also, move back to Wisconsin, or did you already what was it, not Fond du Lac, Lac de Flambeau, is that right?
Yeah.
Lac de Flambeau. So where did that come into all of this?
I've been planning Lac de Flambeau for the last year.
Sure.
I mean, that's where I was going. People know that when I die, my last breath, I want to be looking out my bedroom window overlooking large crawling stone lake. And that's where I want to take my last breath. That's where I knew I would retire and everything. But now I saw a business opportunity up there. My kids are in college. This has also been therapy running for me because my kids have been home every summer. And this is the first summer that they weren't here. And I lived with my kids. And so, this has been really great because otherwise I'd sit around blubbering about my kids not being around me. And, my paper up there and what I wanted to do there was what I was going to do with my work life. And so, I'm used to every week I travel between the Twin Cities. I know Highway 70 and 8. I can shut my eyes and drive them. I know exactly where I'm at, how long it's going to take me to get the next spot, whatever. And my wife, she's a professional. She, she gets home at 7:30 at night. We see each other for about an hour, and then she goes to bed. Hour and a half, she goes to bed. So I mean, she's busy. I'm busy. I'm time for me to get on with my life. So it just happens to be in two different states. I have to come back to Minnesota at least 1 or 2 days a week. I'm in Wisconsin usually 5 days a week, and back here for 1 or 2 because I have to change the cat litter. My wife won't change the cat litter. So the cat litter's got to get changed.
You could just literally hire somebody to do that. Would save you money and gas.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I want to see my cats, though, and I want to see my dogs, too. My dogs have always been in my office. They've always been my office managers, and it's actually the saddest part of this. And I tell you, the weirdest things go through your mind, because as I was thinking about running and things like that, one of the saddest things to me is one of my dogs, like 13, 14, she's probably going to die while I'm in D.C. It's a weird thing, but it made me sad. But again, you're weighing all the things. I've loved having my dogs be around me. I don't worry. It's like when you had your interview with Sarah, and all of a sudden the ball flies through the air.
Oh, right.
Whatever. That's the fun part of the day. The unexpected is what makes life interesting. You wake up, there's a huge snowstorm. To me, that was always the greatest part of the day, because you're like, okay, everything's not going to work out the way I thought it was. It changes things. And to me, life is pretty predictable in most things. To me, the fun things in life are the things that are unpredictable. When you go on a vacation, the thing you remember are the things that went wrong, not the things that you were just planning to do. It's when something really weird happened or something like that. So, I mean, I'm 5 days a week in Wisconsin, and, I'm a couple days here. But again, if I have anything where I have to be connected to the internet, I'm here. Anytime I've had an interview or anything. And the way I do it, really, I look at where I am based upon Spooner, Wisconsin. If I am east of Spooner, I'm going to go to Flambeau for the night. Because, if I stayed in hotels, this district is huge, 26 states. I put more than 20,000 miles. I'm now at about 21,000 miles on my truck and traveling around this district. And if I was staying in hotels, let's just say I'm not raising much money as it is, I wouldn't have anything. So, so if I'm east of Spooner, I'm in Flambeau. If I'm west of Spooner, I go to the Twin Cities to spend the night. Because it's cheap, and the gas is cheaper than paying for a hotel room.
So you saw that you had mentioned a little bit ago that you saw that Tom Tiffany was running unopposed, and you said, I'm gonna run.
Yeah, I just said no. This is not. I saw his positions and everything, and I'm like, no, this is not going to happen.
Is there anything?
I grew up in this district. Part of what I didn't talk, when I was 11, my mom remarried, and I got promoted to middle class. I could actually go into a store and ask for something. My stepdad sold all the fire and police equipment basically in this district, from Stevens Point north to Hurley, as far west as Hawkins. And, and that's why I know what is one of the Republican things is that, Democrats defund the blue. I'm not here to defund the blue. Our best friends were all the sheriffs, Louis Giannoli in Wausau. I played in his kitchen. Ron Krieger in Lincoln County, all the fire chiefs. A good friend was a state patrol officer in the Minocqua area. And I remember him overhearing him talking with my parents one time about how it made him nervous. Every time he approached someone, a car, he could be assaulted, could be shot. He actually resigned from the force a few years after that, picked up another business in the Minocqua area. But I'm like, they don't pay these folks enough, and I'm not here to defund the blue. I'm here to back the blue. They're the best friends of our family, so that you're not going to hold that one on me. And, for Tiffany, it offends me because he's one of these that says that the insurrection on January 6th was just a distraction, as a picnic, whatever. No, law enforcement died. Law enforcement was severely injured. That was not just a walk in the park that day. Don't tell me you're friends of law enforcement when you deny what happened on that day and law enforcement dies. He votes against community policing bills. On his interviews, I've listened to his past interviews on Wisconsin Public Radio and his debates with Tricia Zunker and such. And, he basically blames the police for a lot of the problems that they're not doing their job. And like DAs aren't doing that. They don't want to prosecute violent crime. Tell me a prosecutor that doesn't want to prosecute someone who's committed a violent crime. I just don't find that to be plausible. His solution is he wants all the DAs to track of what they're doing as far as what are they filing and all that. Okay, like a bureaucrat, let's create more paperwork. I am a friend of the blue. I'm not here to defund the blue.
Speaking of like the law and order aspect of it, you had brought up DAs as well, because we're almost up against our time already. I do want to just talk about a few things, and I wrote down that you were kind of talking that some like you had put in. Well, I'll get to these in a second here, but the cash bonds, that's a very popular thing right now. And going to what you were saying regarding supporting the police, defund the police doesn't really seem to be as popular of something to say anymore like it was 2 years ago. It was perfectly fine to say that. Now, Republican, Democrat, everyone is, yay, police, where 2 years ago, not everybody was saying that. But I think for the most part right now, that's kind of just where everybody is. We're fine with that. But now it seems like the bigger topic is cash bonds. What should we do with those? When you look into the stuff and you see either what your opponent has said about these things, or you look at what other maybe Republicans or Democrats, your colleagues, where people are in this, where do you fall on the topic of cash bonds? Should that be addressed? And if so, what does that look like?
I'd never heard of it before. I'm not up to speed on that problem.
Okay.
I have to learn more about that. I mean, I've been asked questions of like, the incarceration we have is most of them are low-level drug offenders, non-violent. You want to clear out your prison systems and such. Let's look at the non-violent drug offenders. Again, we in Wisconsin sit as an island where we're the only state that doesn't have recreation or legalized medicinal cannabis. And, you take that out of the equation, that's going to let law enforcement focus on things that they should, the more violent things and the things that, people are dealing with. From Tom Tiffany, I got under the crime, but what people have to understand is, what got me to run is when I realized he voted against lowering the cost of insulin. Diabetes is huge in our district. And to vote against lowering the cost of insulin, I met a person 2 weekends in a row in Forest County and Florence County at their fairs. And they have pumps on, and they're paying $3,200 a month for their insulin. And insurance covers some of it, but they're covering most of it. And the rate of diabetes is huge. And to not try and help people with lowering their cost of diabetes, capping it, it's being tone deaf to the needs of the citizens of this district. When I'm in a parade and I see a mom and I tell her that he voted against the infant formula funding bill, there were actually 3 infant formula bills. One was that those who were on assistance, they couldn't get their kind of formula, so they voted to allow them to get more expensive formula. But guess what? Then he votes not to give them the funding. They can't afford it in the first place, so then you don't give them the funding to be able to buy the more expensive stuff. And then the other one was just imported. He just recently voted against the Honor Our Pact Act. He voted against helping our veterans with their medical needs from toxic substances, right? And that's not just Iraq and Afghanistan. It's people who are sick and have died because of the toxins in the burn pits in Afghanistan. It also goes to those who are suffering from Agent Orange in Vietnam. There's still veterans who are suffering from radiation sickness from Korea. It also includes the camps that have tainted water, like Camp Lejeune and Pearl Harbor, where these folks are sick and dying because of the water that they've drank. That helps all of them. He voted against it. He also voted against the Gold Star family education for our fallen soldiers to help their families get an education. He just voted against the 2023 Defense Appropriations Bill. I guess we don't need a defense in 2023, and then he wants to privatize Social Security. That is a horrible idea. And this 20,000 miles, the last month and a half were fairs and farm events. And most of the folks I'm talking to are Republicans. I run into one Republican that thinks privatizing Social Security is a good idea. It's a horrible idea. Social Security, he wants to privatize it. And we can solve Social Security in one day. It's a huge concern of people. It doesn't matter what your political stripe for any of these things. And
how is that?
Most folks.
Because this stuff, by the way, this is all foreign to me. I don't understand any of this stuff. So
most folks don't understand that there's a cap on earnings. When someone currently makes $147,000 a year,
Uh-huh.
they stop contributing to Social Security. Most people don't make $147,000, but those that do, they get to stop contributing to Social Security. You eliminate the cap on contributions, and Social Security is immediately solved. It really is
Wait,
that easy.
hold on a second. You mean like it goes up in percentage and how much you do, or is like if you make 150 grand a year, then you literally don't pay anything to Social Security, or is it just
You
it doesn't?
stop after that for the rest of the year. Once you make once you make
I didn't know that.
$147,000, you then get to stop contributing to Social Security. If you eliminated the cap, Social Security would be solved today. And when I
What?
tell folks this, they actually get angry because once and again, it's the wealthy who are taking advantage of those who don't have those means. And why does someone, if they're so blessed to make that amount of money, get to stop contributing? That's where you start giving back to society. They make another 100,000, so okay, you contribute another 7,400 bucks to Social Security, but you get to keep 93,000 plus in your pocket minus taxes. It's a pretty good trade-off for solving Social Security, because also folks who make a lot of money need Social Security at times too. All of Bernie Madoff's victims are probably pretty happy they have Social Security because they lost their savings. Rich people make mistakes too and eventually need Social Security. But it's that simple. It really is. And
So,
then,
oh,
I
sorry.
mean, well, no, I mean, the other option is you start raising the rates for everybody. But why are we going to start raising the rates for someone making $14,000 a year where they have to pay commensurately when, again, all you do is you
That's
eliminate
crazy.
the cap and it's solved. That easy. It really is.
So you
And
have
Tom,
a lot of things, and because we're right at our normal time, and it's perfectly fine that we go over a little bit, but we could now go into a lot of where do you exactly stand on this, and this, but we'll be here for like another hour and a half.
sure,
You have a lot of ideas. You have a lot of your views. This is what I want to get done, and sure, people can go to your website to find out stuff. What's your website?
Ausman for Congress, and it's all spelled out AUSMANFORCONGRESS.com.
Okay,
And
but
my non-manifesto manifesto is there with
perfect. That's what I was hoping
everything
that was on there.
I
A lot
talked
of this
about.
stuff is on there where it's a little more detailed stuff.
Yeah,
Again, we really want to get to know you, the person, then talk a little bit of politics here.
yeah.
But going into this race, Tom Tiffany won basically two races against his previous opponent. You had mentioned Tricia Zunker, a special election, and then a few months later had to do it again. Very well funded, and he won. I don't know, like 60, 61, whatever,
Yeah,
the 30. He won
60, 40,
convincingly at both
yeah.
times. He really did. Going into this one, and you had just mentioned, or a little earlier, that not that much money, and it's a congressional race. It's already hard enough to beat a congressional a candidate who's running for re-election. It's like at 90% or something really stupid high in terms of the likelihood of them. It's hard to beat an incumbent in a
Yeah.
congressional race. It just is. For Republicans, Democrats, it's just the way that it is. How can you win this race?
Because I'm meeting with people and once Republicans and independents understand Tom Tiffany, his voting record, they don't like it. Again, he voted against Medicare being able to, what is everybody talking about? How Medicare should be able to negotiate drug prices.
Mm-hmm.
He voted against it, and he's voted against all aid for Ukraine. The problem too with Tom, what really upsets me, I believe in the truth, and he has a real problem with the truth. He plays both sides. He says he voted against all aid for Ukraine. He's voted against aid for Ukraine because we have to focus on domestic issues like the infant formula crisis, and then he votes against the infant formula funding bill. He was actually I'm listening to him in an interview on Wisconsin Public Radio, and he's talking about how he voted for research for PFAS, the pollution that's hitting wells like in Wausau and Rhinelander. Well, you can go on his record. He voted against the PFAS Action Act. He voted against scientists already know what is bad, and their other research. He voted against that. He was a co-sponsor of the Lasting Smiles, which is people that have deformities and dental and things like that. He was actually a co-sponsor, but then you look a little further down, he voted against it. I was on a show yesterday, and the host was telling me how Tiffany was telling him that he thinks it's okay for people to have contraceptives. He voted against the Contraceptives Act. He doesn't believe people should have access to contraceptives. I thought that was solved back in the 60s. And I also had at the Barron County Fair, I run into a
Yeah.
teacher. The teacher is telling me how Tiffany was going around telling people that critical race is being taught in their public schools. And he goes up to him, I'm a teacher. I'd like to know where critical race is, what school this is being taught in. And Tiffany's like, I'll get to you. I'll get that to you. Never hears from him, sees him at another event. Said, you're going to send me this. I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you. Never got it. Makes a phone call to his office. Never gets a response. Well, he just saw him at the Polk County Fair, probably 7, 8 weeks ago. I was there, not with this guy, but he runs into Tiffany again. He goes, I'm an educator. You told me you were going to tell me where they are teaching critical race in our school. And Tiffany blurts out, I lied. And there's people standing around. That's who your legislator is. That's why I'm running.
Was it like in a joking way?
What's that?
Was it like a joking way?
I've heard that when Tom is pushed, he can sort of like react in a bad way. When he's not coming. Town halls. I mean, when I grew up, town halls, you let everybody know when they were so anybody could come in and ask any questions.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea of having a town hall, right?
Yeah. Now you get a phone call like 2 minutes before saying, we'd like you to join in. And they know who they're going. I mean, they don't want to have any questions that they're not going to feel comfortable answering. That's not the point of what a town hall is.
Maybe that's why he likes coming on our show once a month, because I don't ask him any questions.
Could be. I don't know. But these are all the things. I mean, I grew up in the Republican Party. Yeah. When my mom remarried, our best friends were Tiny Krieger, state senator, she and Donahue, assemblywoman. Alvin Okonski represented this district, or most of it, for 31 years. He was a Republican. He would be called a Democrat today. In fact, in his obituary, he's quoted as saying, I'm really a Democrat domestically, but internationally. And so people understand where I come from, too. My dad's first cousin was Laverne Ausman. Laverne Ausman was Secretary of the Agriculture of Wisconsin, Republican. He was head of the Farm Administration Bureau under the first Bush. He was a two-time assembly person from Elk Mound, Republican. And when we had a family reunion, he just passed away in December, but we had a family reunion 3 years ago in Elk Mound, and I went up to him, Laverne, I don't want to talk politics, but I'm just curious what you make of all of this. And he was the tallest Ausman in our family. He was 6'4", and he always had a really gentle smile. And he looks down at me, he goes, all I can say is this is the first time in my life I didn't vote Republican for president. And I try and help Republicans understand this is not the Republican Party of 45, 50 years ago. And I also try and help, because my brother one of my brothers went to Ripon College. He played piano in the Republican Lounge. I mean, we were all Republican. I mean, we'd go, and the little white schoolhouse was a shrine to me because it represented the party that abolished slavery. And then I hear Tiffany on a interview talking about, the party of Abe and how important, because they were the party that abolished slavery. And he's one of 14 Republican legislators. Only 14 Congresspeople voted not to recognize the Juneteenth holiday, which recognizes the abolishment of slavery. Don't tell me you're from the party of Abe when you vote against the very the celebration of abolishing slavery in our country. And only 14 Congress people did that out of the entire Congress. And he's one of them. He's the only Republican legislator that voted in Wisconsin that voted against aid for Ukraine. He's an equal opportunity offender. It doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican. He voted against the Great Outdoors Act. The Great Outdoors Act was supported by most Republicans, signed in great fanfare by President Trump. He voted against that. He wants to reverse. He's a co-sponsor of the Pittman-Robertson Act, which he's having problems with the hunters and the conservationists in the state, because the Pittman-Robertson Act was established in 1937. I believe it was the Roosevelt administration. The gun manufacturers actually asked for this. It's a portion of the taxes when you buy ammunition or a firearm. A portion of that goes to hunter safety courses. It goes to conservancy efforts and everything like that. He wants to overturn it. You then had Grothman in the 8th district who took himself off the bill. He knows that it's poison and it's the wrong side to be on. Not Tom, driving straight ahead. Let's get rid of the Pittman-Robertson Act. That's not agreeable by the folks, the hunters and the conservationists of this state, and it just goes on and on. On my website, it has a link. Anyone can just Google Tom Tiffany's voting record, and you'll see it. No, 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 no. And also really critical is what people have to understand is he has missed, in the last Congress, 116th Congress, he has missed 350% more votes than the average congressperson. He is paid a nice salary, and he doesn't have the decency to show up, to do the work, to make the votes. And from what I can tell of looking at his attendance record, his voting record, I think he's on the same track record for the current 117th. We don't have the stats for it yet, but to miss 350% more votes than the average congressperson, I'm sorry.
Someone else, I think Patty, I think when Patty Shockner resigned, I think she brought that up about her opponent. And I tried to find it, and I should have just asked Patty. I probably should have just texted her. But I've always wanted to see that information because I hear people talking about
Google it.
Just
Google
okay, I didn't know if you just happen to know off the top of your head.
Congressional.
It's not the voting record, but in terms of attendance stuff, where is that stuff usually? Where is that?
It's iVote.com or something like that.
I'll just
if you
Google
Google it,
Okay.
Because the average, most Congress people miss about 2% of their votes.
Sure.
That's the average. And he's missed 6.9% in the 116th
Sure.
Congress.
Yeah. No, I
mean,
love
that's
looking
just
at that
math.
stuff.
There's
And I know that there's a lot of like
350%.
COVID and whatever, but yeah, that's what I like to see is
But
the
no,
comparison.
but everybody else is dealing
That's
with
what I
that
mean. Like,
too.
is the comparison during the same amount of time, the same part of this, then you can see, then I'm like, okay, now I have context. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, I have one more question for you here, and that is you had brought up, well, you've talked a little bit about, kind of grew up Republicans and knowing a lot of people, kind of grew up Republican. It's kind of what I was hearing. But the Republican Party today is not like what the Republican Party was when you were growing up. But you, at the very beginning of the show, had talked about that you were, when you started that first magazine or that alternative, news, was really you were independent. But you're running as a Democrat. Why not as an independent?
I wouldn't get elected. You know, I lived more years in Wisconsin than I have lived in Minnesota. So if you compare, I've lived 31 years in Wisconsin. I lived 30 years in Minnesota. So I've got one more year in Wisconsin. Now I'm back to Wisconsin. I actually got my old driver's license back. That was a lot of fun. Same number. You know, because growing up in the Republican Party, when I turned 18, my first election, I voted for Bill Proxmire. I'm like, and what I just learned last night, I didn't know this. Bill Proxmire only voted with the Democratic Party 60% of the time. But when I learned about this guy, you know, he had the Golden Fleece Award. He was in government finding out that who was wasting the taxpayers' money. And I'm like, I like this guy. So having grown up in the Republican Party, but all of a sudden my first vote goes to a Democratic senator. And I realize, you know, to me, it's about the person. It's not about the party. One of the problems right now is we're so party oriented. I wish people would think I don't represent the Democratic Party. I'm not here to represent the Democratic Party. I am here to represent the constituents of the 7th District. You know, I don't care what the party is. I just happen to align now with the Democratic Party. When I had, you know, I was like, oh, I won't win as an independent. I was living in Minnesota when I voted for Jesse Ventura, and he actually won, and nobody could believe that he won.
I was living in Minnesota when that happened too. We're all like, what?
And I'm like, oh, I had talked to Norm Coleman. I was going to the polls. He was running as Republican. Yeah. And I'm in front of the IDS, and I go, Norm, I'd like to know about this and this. He goes, that's not important. What's important is I'm the only person that has governing experience. And I'm like, well, no, I'd like to know how you sit on this.
Wasn't he the mayor of something?
I walked to the polls. He was, and he was both Democrat and Republican.
Yeah. Who's the other guy? There was Norm Coleman, Ventura, and who's the other one? Chris.
Humphrey.
Yeah, not Chris.
Bill?
I can't remember. Oh, that's right. Boy.
But he was a Democrat, but he wasn't the one I was gonna vote for him. I was thinking I was gonna vote for Norm, Republican, but then again, Norm wouldn't answer my question, so then I voted Jesse. And so, you know, I wouldn't win as an independent. I do want to win, and I don't understand the Republican Party. And what I found is that I line up with the Democratic Party. It's, to me, it's the Republican Party of 45, 50 years ago. Sure. Most of the folks I meet tell me that they're former Republicans.
And where is it, again, that people can go and find out information about you?
AusmanForCongress.com.
AusmanFor,
yep.
Congress.com. Dick, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here, Ben. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to talk more about.
We
I understand you love Star Trek and stuff like that.
Yes, I do.
Again, I'm O'Hara today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're kind of nerds on that one. You and I, we have a lot of similarities.
We'd encourage everybody to go watch The Fifth Element, one of the greatest movies.
Also, we've had a lot of conversations about that. No kidding, that movie is legit. Awesome, Dick.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Best wishes and good luck to you in the election in November.
Thanks, Ben.
Special thank you to our guest today, Democrat nominee in Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, Richard Dick Ausman, for taking the time out of his day to chat with us. I will see you right back here on Tuesday when Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and I will be back for our latest, I think it's our 110th episode of Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy. And 1 week from today, I will be chatting with Democrat candidate for Wisconsin's 29th, pretty sure it's the 29th Assembly District, Danielle Johnson. So until then, for DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden saying thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.